Good evening. Today's subject is Edgware Road and Edgware Road. 2 stations, 1 name. This is another of those underground oddities that I'm sure is endlessly frustrating for anyone new to the city, and nothing to do with Edgware. One of the stations is on the District, Hammersmith and City and Circle lines, and the other is on the Bakerloo line. Now, if you're a regular viewer on this channel, then you've probably already figured out how this situation arose. It's that old problem of the way the underground was built. The individual lines were built by several different companies with no real thought of building a coherent, integrated network. The Bakerloo line station was built by the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway and opened in 1907, although by that time the company had already accepted the name Bakerloo as an official alternative name, which is pretty useful if you're, say, a narrator who has to say the name of a railway company a lot. Originally, the Bakerloo only ran from Kennington Road, now Lambeth North, to Baker Street and wasn't as popular as hoped. It had something of a checkered early history. Its original promoter, Whittaker Wright, was a swindler who had been caught and committed suicide. I did a video on the subject which I'll link below. The scheme was taken over by Charles Yerkes, who was also a swindler. I love the underground, but it can't be denied that there were some pretty dodgy characters behind it. Anyway, I also did a video on Yerkes, which again, link below. Yerkes bought the Bakerloo out before it was built with no aim beyond short-term gain, and the only reason the whole thing didn't fall apart was because he was succeeded by management who actually did have an interest in the long term. But it was touch and go. Sometimes a rush-hour train might carry as few as 100 people. Trains were reduced from 6 cars to 3. The magazine Railway Engineer described it as a beautiful failure. Extension was a priority, and within 2 years of opening it had extended north to Marylebone and then to Edgware Road. The Bakerloo wanted to extend out even further, but that's another story. The Bakerloo line was part of the Underground Electric Railways of London group. In common with that group's other stations, it was designed with an oxblood tiled facade by Leslie Green. At platform level, the UERL stations had unique tiling patterns to make them instantly recognisable to regular commuters, and Edgware Road is, of course, no exception. As an older station, it predates escalators, with the platforms being accessed by lifts. These were still wood-panelled until 1990. It's the only surviving Bakerloo line station to retain the tiled lettering on the facade. It also has this delightful grille, which dates back to the 1980s. No, that's not a mistake. There used to be a side entrance, which is still visible though no longer in use. It looks nothing like the frontage, and some historians have theorised that it wasn't actually designed by Leslie Green. Green did have assistants, but they stuck to the corporate identity. So maybe it was an outside contractor or something. The booking hall is absolutely delightful, but it's actually all replicated. The original features were almost all stripped out during modernisation. Okay, so now let's look at the other Edgware Road, the District, Circle and Hammersmith and City one. This is far older than the Bakerloo. Actually, it's one of the oldest stations on the network, having been opened in 1863. It was built by the Metropolitan Railway, whose ownership is somewhat confusingly still emblazoned on the outside. Ironic, given that the Metropolitan is the only subsurface line that doesn't stop there. Oddly enough, the Metropolitan were a bit inconsistent about the station's name in the early days. Some timetables spelt it Edgeware, and others used its modern spelling. In 1865 it gained a refreshment room. In 1879 it became one of the first stations on the underground to be lit by electricity, along with Aldersgate, or Barbican as you would know it. It would be another 26 years before the actual tracks were electrified. And for most of its history, it just seems to have sort of pootled along. In 1949, the Circle line officially came into existence, which took over some of the services through the station that had hitherto been run by the Metropolitan line. In 1990, the Hammersmith and City line became a separate entity, removing the rest of the Metropolitan services and making the station frontage look a bit silly. In 2005, the station gained a rather unfortunate distinction, as it was one of the targets of the 7/7 bombings. The suicide bomber here was Mohammed Siddiq Khan, believed to be the leader of the terrorists behind the attack. He took 6 others with him. In 2009, the Circle Line service was restructured to run to Hammersmith. Now, I have done a whole video on this, which I'll, again, link in the description below. But, to cut a long story short, this extension was created so that they could work a bit of breathing space into the timetable and delayed trains wouldn't be stuck on the same line all day, holding other trains up. Just as the Circle now had one end at Hammersmith, so it gained another at Edgware Road, which is why it's such a pain in the backside to figure the trains out here. This is also where a lot of the District Line trains from Wimbledon terminate. In 2012, the station gained an electrical substation, because the new S-Stock trains, the type of train you see on all the subsurface lines these days, drew more current than the older ones. A substation is something that only a very small minority of people would find aesthetically pleasing, so the artist Jacqueline Poncelet created a vitreous enamel cladding to cover it up. The designs on it are inspired by the history of the area. The biggest obstacle between the two stations has to be Marylebone Flyover, part of the Westway, which was built in 1967. The Bakerloo station had formerly been in the middle of a parade of shops which were partially demolished to make way for this Ballardian monstrosity. What I find quite interesting is the way the area drastically changes the moment you pass under the road. On the side with the old Metropolitan station it feels very West End, you're definitely still in the city. There are upmarket houses, hotels, big blocks of expensive flats, yet the moment you cross that threshold it feels a bit shabbier. Smaller, more suburban. It doesn't feel like the same place as the other station at all. Indeed, in 2007, London Assembly member Murad Qureshi proposed that the Bakerloo Edgware Road be renamed after nearby Church Street Market to avoid the confusion that inevitably resulted from the two stations. TfL declined his suggestion on the grounds of cost, so the confusion is likely to remain forevermore. But I'd like to know what you think. Should one of the stations be renamed, or is it a quirk you can put up with? Do you like the confusion? Are you some sort of anarchist who thrives on confusion and chaos? Actually, you don't need to tell me about that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this duplicitous tale from the tube. If you did, then please do hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. I'd like to thank my beautiful donors for supporting this channel, and if you'd like to be as cool as them, there are links to my Ko-fi and Patreon pages below. On the Patreon page you can get sneak previews of upcoming work, insights into the creative process, early access to videos, raw footage, and even some exclusive videos. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.